As I've been reading through The Lord of the Rings, I have been waiting for a chapter that tells me more about what the ring actually does. Like, how does it poison the mind of the wearer? How is it that no one can really wield it? I know that it makes you invisible because Frodo puts it on numerous times and it makes him invisible. But as the story goes on, this has kind of been a bit more abstract of an idea for me. But I just read the first chapter of book 6, where Sam actually takes the ring, puts it on, and then he goes to find Frodo, and then Frodo actually snatches the ring back, and he sees this weird little vision, and it is a phenomenal chapter that gives so much information on the ring and just the insidious nature of what it actually does. So in this essay, I just want to walk through this chapter and talk about a few occurrences of the ring and the writing that Tolkien has for just the power of the ring and what it really does. I want to talk about Frodo snatching the ring back from Sam and what Frodo saw after he took it. I want to talk about how the ring tempted Sam and how incredible of a line that is, how Frodo essentially becomes Boromir in this chapter. And one of the more interesting things that I think this chapter kind of potentially raises is the phial of Galadriel potentially counteracting the effects of the ring in any way? That last point is maybe a bit speculative, so we'll get that. We'll get there when we get there. But let's begin. So this chapter starts off with Samwise grieving and trying to find a way back to Frodo. He follows some orcs until the door gets shut in his face, and he retraces his steps and puts the ring on to get into Mordor. The very fact that Samwise puts on the ring in the book is still very shocking to me. I think in Middle-earth, you have Frodo, Bilbo, Sauron, Tom Bombadil, Gollum, and Sam Gamgee are the only people to have put it on. I could be wrong about that. There could be more. But I think that is all that I at least know of at the moment. But Sam puts on the one ring and then walks to the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and we get a really interesting description of what the ring starts doing to him in this moment. I think at this moment there is a significant home court advantage that the ring has. Before, when they were further away from Mordor, it seemed like the ring had power, but a lot less than it does right now. I think it just felt like the ring was suggesting and whispering things in previous sections of the book, but now that it's in Mordor, it feels like maybe, it's happy that it's home. It's offering people things that they want, just flat out yelling at them rather than whispering. It feels like the ring is just comfortable, and maybe even less than that. Maybe the ring feels like a tiger that's cornered. It just wants to get back to Sauron more than anything else. So it offers up the deepest desires of a person's heart. Kind of a bit like the Mirror of Erised in Harry Potter. But this is the description that we get when Samwise wears the ring and what it tempts him with. His thought turned to the ring, but there was no comfort there, only dread and danger. No sooner had he come in sight of Mount Doom, burning far away, than he was aware of a change in his burden. As it grew near the great furnaces where, in the deeps of time, it had been shaped and forged, the ring's power grew, and it became more fell, untamable, save by some mighty will. Now, this is the home court advantage that I was talking about, that the ring kind of feels like it's experiencing. But the book goes on. As Sam stood there, even though the ring was not on him, but hanging by its chain about his neck, he felt himself enlarged, as if he were robed in a huge distorted shadow of himself. A vast and ominous threat halted upon the walls of Mordor. He felt that he had, from now on, only two choices: to forbear the ring, though it would torment him, or to claim it, and challenge the power that sat in its dark hold beyond the Valley of Shadows. Only a Sith deals in absolutes, am I right? But weirdly, I do think there is some kind of George Lucas thievery going on right here. I think it's an interesting comparison to make about the idea where Sam feels like he only has two options here, which these might legitimately be the only two options that he really has. But Sam does feel cornered at this moment, so I think there's a really interesting comparison to make there. I'm not going to go into that much more, but the text goes on to talk about how the ring actually tempts him and what it tempts him with. Already the ring tempted him, gnawing at his will and reason. Wild fantasies arose in his mind, and he saw Samwise the Strong. hero of the age, striding with a flaming sword across the darkened land, and armies flocking to his call as he marched to the overthrow of Barad-dûr. And then all the clouds rolled away, and the white sun shone, and at his command the Vale of Gorgoroth became a garden of flowers and trees, and brought forth fruit. He had only to put on the ring and claim it for his own. And all this could be. Now, this is a lie. There is no way that if Sam puts on the ring that all this could actually happen. But hold on to this thought for just a bit, because I think it speaks very much of the power and the purity that Sam possesses here. What Frodo sees later is vastly different, and the comparison and contrast between the two is interesting. Mainly because they are just at different points in bearing the ring, but it's interesting because Sam sees himself vanquish the enemy and set up a garden in the land of Mordor. Now this is perfect, but I'm kind of reminded a little bit of Galadriel. In place of a Dark Lord, you'll have a queen, not, terrible and beautiful. For Sam, you'll have a gardener king, which sounds nice at the beginning, but we all know that this gardener king would probably be driven mad, and the ring would then cause Sam to torture people who didn't plant things in the way that Sam wanted them to be planted, or maybe plant the same trees that Sam wanted to be planted. But at the same point too, I think I too am just with Sam at this moment and thinking, I think maybe if Sam puts on the ring and then does all this, then all will be well. If there is anyone who has a pure heart in this story and a pure mind and kind of would actually accomplish the things that the ring puts into their mind, I feel like it would be Sam. Well, Tom Bombadil, but Sam might be next in line. But the book goes on to talk more about this. In that hour of trial, it was the love of his master that helped most to hold him firm. Now, to me, this is Sam recognizing that the ring is lying. But also, deep down in him, lived still unconquered his plain hobbit sense. He knew in the core of his heart that he was not large enough to bear such a burden, even if such visions were not a mere cheat to betray him. This is it. This is why hobbits are just so incredible. They are simple creatures with plain hobbit sense. And the next paragraph and the next line of this paragraph is my absolute favorite. The one small garden of a free gardener was all his need and due. Not a garden swollen to a realm. His own hands to use, not the hands of others to command. And anyway, all these notions are only a trick, he said to himself. He'd spot me and cow me before I could so much as shout out. He'd spot me pretty quick if I put the ring on now, in Mordor. Well, all I can say is things look as hopeless as a frost in spring. Just when being invisible would really be useful, I can't use the ring. And if ever I get any farther, it's going to be nothing but a drag and a burden every step. So what's to be done? He was not really in any doubt. He knew that he must go down to the gate and not linger any more. With a shrug of his shoulders, as if to shake off the shadow and dismiss the phantoms, he began slowly to descend. Now, I don't know why, but I just love the idea that he just shrugs off the power of the ring. He is tempted, but he just shrugs it off on his shoulders, just as if like this thing isn't really all that hard of a debate for him. And again, I talked about this, I speak in hyperbole a lot, but the next sentence is so vital too. With each step, he seemed to diminish. He had not gone far before he had shrunk again to a very small and frightened hobbit. He was now passing under the very walls of the tower, and the cries and sounds of fighting could be heard with his unaided ears. At the moment, the noise seemed to be coming from the court behind the outer wall. Now that first line, that with each step he seemed to diminish, this is how you defeat the ring. Sam has this false identity that the ring is giving to him, that he is the important one in this story, that he can be the one that destroys all the ring and the power of the ring, or he destroys all evil and then makes all things right. But Sam seems to understand that it's not ego that destroys the ring. It's about humility, which is why I love that moment with Galadriel even more now, that when she's tempted, because she goes from this huge, terrible woman to a woman that's very, very small. The description in the book in that section is, she lifted up her hands, and from the ring that she wore, there issued a great light that illuminated her alone and left all else dark. She stood before Frodo, seeming now tall beyond measurement, and beautiful beyond enduring, terrible and worshipful. Then she let her hand fall, and the light faded. And suddenly she laughed again, and lo, she was shrunken, a slender elf woman, clad in simple white, whose gentle voice was soft and sad. So Sam is diminishing in the land of Mordor, but that is exactly what a person needs to do in order to destroy the One Ring. Sauron seems to think that by putting this into the ring, that the person will be driven mad by their smallness and the smallness of themselves. But Sam, who knows his worth but also is not overly proud, diminishes in this land as he overcomes temptation. And his humility is the thing that really wins out in the battle here. I just love that line so much. But now I want to take a little bit of a different opinion here and talk about Frodo's experience with the ring, because it's very different from Sam's, and it's really fascinating. The book says this: "They've taken everything, Sam," said Frodo. "Everything I had. Do you understand? Everything." He cowered on the floor again, with bowed head, as his own words brought home to him the fullness of the disaster, and despair overwhelmed him. "The quest has failed, Sam. Even if we get out of here, we can't escape. Only elves can escape. Away, away out of Middle-earth, far away over the sea. If even that is wide enough to keep the shadow out. No, not everything, Mr. Frodo. And it hasn't failed. Not yet. I took it, Mr. Frodo, begging your pardon. And I've kept it safe. It's round my neck now. And a terrible burden it is, too." Sam fumbled for the ring in its chain. "But I suppose you must take it back." Now it had come to it, Sam felt reluctant to give up the ring and burden his master with it again. Let's pause here for a minute, because this moment is, the ring is trying everything. The ring tempted Sam with a beautiful garden that would fill Middle-earth. And when the ring realized that Sam overcame that temptation, now the ring tempts him with something that Sam loves even more than gardening, which is his master, Frodo. The ring is playing on the best parts of Sam, which is so wicked and evil. And it is trying to twist those beautiful, pure parts of Sam, and it's trying to drive a wedge between these two characters. But I still love that in the books. I still love this moment in the books, because in the movies, the face of Sam in this moment is more like he's tempted to hold on to the ring because Frodo looks obsessed with it, rather than because, in the books, he doesn't want to give the ring back because he just doesn't want to burden Frodo with the ring any longer. The way that the ring is just tempting him is by his love of Frodo, again, which is wild. It is so insidious and so disgusting. But the book goes on. "You've got it," gasped Frodo. "You've got it here? Sam, you're a marvel." Then quickly and strangely, his tone changed. "Give it to me," he cried, standing up, holding out a trembling hand. "Give it me at once. You can't have it." Now, this makes me think Frodo is actually kind of possessed by the ring to some extent, and it is a smidge scary that his voice and tone changes in this moment as his demand for the ring, increases. "All right, Mr. Frodo," said Sam, rather startled. "Here it is." Slowly he drew the ring out and passed the chain over his head. "But you're in the land of Mordor now, sir, and when you get out, you'll see the fiery mountain and all. You'll find the ring very dangerous now and very hard to bear. If it's too hard a job, I could share it with you, maybe." Now, this, again, is so interesting to me. I'm so curious about if this is really the ring tempting Sam to hold on to it, or if this is just the purity of Samwise to want to bear the burden with Frodo. It probably is a little bit of both, obviously, but that whole idea of sharing the load doesn't really seem all that bad. Although, I do kind of think that it would destroy both of them, which, isn't that great. But if they made it out alive, their relationship would just be demolished here. And I think, too, that the ring probably sees two very similar creatures to Deagle and Smeagol and thinks, hey, I tried this once and it worked before. Maybe let me give it another shot. But what Frodo says makes it seem like he's not in his clear mind at all here. He says, "No, no," cried Frodo, snatching the ring and chain from Sam's hands. "No, you won't, you thief," he panted, staring at Sam with eyes wide with fear and enmity. Then suddenly, clasping the ring in one clenched fist, he stood aghast. A mist seemed to clear from his eyes, and he passed a hand over his aching brow. The hideous vision had seemed so real to him. Half bemused as he was still with wound and fear, Sam had changed before his very eyes into an orc again. leering and pawing at his treasure. A foul little creature with greedy eyes and slobbering mouth. But now the vision had passed. There was Sam, kneeling before him, his face wrung with pain, as if he had been stabbed in the heart. Tears welled from his eyes. "Oh, Sam," cried Frodo, "what have I said? What have I done? Forgive me." This is exactly, word for word, what Boromir said after he was tempted by the ring and tried to take it from Frodo. Word for word. I think that it's really interesting so that so many people are really harsh to Boromir in that moment of his temptation. But when Frodo does it, it's just different, which granted the situation is different because the temptation does really feel different, but it is still a mirror image of what Boromir says to Frodo. This is the moment that Frodo becomes Boromir. Boromir even says, "A madness took me, but it has passed." And this is the same exact thing that overtakes Frodo in this moment, a bit of madness. But it passes. The ring is really a torturous device. It's really sad for what it does to people and their relationships with others. But even the fact that the ring just turns Sam into this creature in Frodo's mind, who is an orc, pawing and wanting the ring, when in reality the situation is that Sam is just out here trying to help bear the burden. But he is likely doing that by the temptation of the ring as well. Essentially, the ring just seems like it just tortures people and uses people for its own aim, which is to get back to Sauron, or maybe just to find a master who's stronger than Sauron. Perhaps in its initial temptation of Sam sees a being who really would actually have the strength to rule the world. I mean, he defeated Shelob, and Sam is probably, at the moment, the most feared being in all of Middle-earth. Precursor onto that, if you mess with Frodo. But the book goes on. "After all you have done, it is the horrible power of the ring. I wish it had never been found. But don't mind me, Sam. I must carry the burden to the end. It can't be altered. You can't get between me and this doom." "That's all right, Mr. Frodo," said Sam, rubbing his sleeve across his eyes. "I understand. But I can still help, can't I? I've got to get you out of here." Frodo realized that he alone can bear this burden. And it's beautiful that Sam thinks he can help, but it's really nothing that he can do. But the last part of this whole shebang that I want to talk about is the idea of the real speculation of this essay, the idea that the phial of Galadriel actually counteracts the effects of the ring. Now, the reason I am starting to kind of think this is because the ring has not only not been nearly as powerful as a burden for Frodo in this entire series, but in the books, there's not really like a huge amount of examples of the ring actually psychologically messing with Frodo in the same way that it's doing here. And there's moments, especially with the temptation of Boromir, where Frodo is the one who is in possession of the ring, and the ring is tempting Boromir, but Frodo has the phial in his possession at that moment. So maybe the ring's not necessarily tempting him quite as much, or maybe the temptation that the ring is experiencing is totally different from what Boromir is experiencing in that moment. But there are a few moments in the books when it does kind of psychologically torture Frodo. But I think maybe the biggest confusion of the book until this point is that it just doesn't seem to be doing that much to Frodo. At this point in the movie, Frodo is unbearable, and he's whiny, and he's just all over the place. But in the book, I was confused for what the ring actually did. And now I know that the ring is in Mordor. I know that its power has also grown, but another difference is that Samwise at the end of the chapter gave the ring back to Frodo, but didn't give him the phial. So for me, it makes sense that the phial is actually counteracting, at least to some degree, the effects of the ring. I don't know how it really does this, but it's like there is something that is just so evil, but you also have something on your person that is so pure and so good that the phial is actually doing its best to counteract the effects of the evil ring. And it might lose in the end, but it just, feels ominous that Frodo doesn't have the phial of Galadriel on his person, because Sam's temptation seems different from Frodo's temptation in this section. And Sam had the ring and the phial, and Frodo only has the ring. But I'm just really curious to see what comes of this. Does Frodo get it back? Does he really devolve after this point? The ring bearer of whoever is bearing the ring should also be the bearer of the phial. So I just don't know, but I still, don't know enough about the phial to have an educated answer on all this. But it is much Is it too much of a spoiler to really talk about this or, talk fan theory in the comments? Let me know if you think of anything in this theory. But I think this chapter doesn't just really give us a better look at the ring's power. I think it's really starting to help me understand the actual nature of the ring more than any other chapter before. Up until now, the One Ring has really been mysterious. And weirdly, it's almost been like a non-factor, which just sounds weird saying that. But now in Mordor, I'm really starting to see what the ring is. It's lying, and it's a deceptive, and it's a tempting, and it's a spiritual predator. It doesn't really tempt everyone with the same, lure. It whispers the exact lie that you really want it to believe, or that you yourself want to believe. It offers Sam the crown of a gardener king. It offers Frodo possession and escape, and it twists their love for each other into this fear and this desperation that they feel. Again, I think it feels like the Mirror of Erised to me. I feel like there's a lot of good comparisons with that. It drives you mad if you look at it too long. And at the same time, this chapter also clarifies the antidote to the ring, which again is humility and potentially the phial. But Sam diminishing with every step, shrugging off, his visions of glory and returning to his plain hobbit sense, I think this is the counteraction of the ring and the true way to destroy the ring. The ring feeds on ego. Frodo's tragedy in this chapter is becoming a mirror of Boromir for just a brief moment, and I think this shows exactly what happens when the burden becomes too great. The ring shrinks your world to a single feel, a single fear, a single desire. Just one little command. Mine. My own. My precious. It's all about me. And that's why the last question is the most fascinating to me. Does the phial of Galadriel counteract the effects of the ring? Is the light of Erendil, this concentrated holy potion, not really potion, the light of the star, is this actually some kind of spiritual balm that keeps the ring from dominating Frodo completely? And if that's true, then what does this mean that Frodo no longer has it? This is the first chapter where we see him truly break under the weight of the ring. Is that because they're in Mordor? Because the ring is stronger, maybe? Or maybe because for the first time in his entire journey, Frodo is bearing the ring truly alone, without the one artifact in Middle-earth designed to push against the darkness of the ring. This is all speculative, I just don't know. But whatever the answer is, this chapter makes, the story less of an adventure story and more of a tragedy to me. You have Sam's humility, you have Frodo's terror, you have the ring's, terrible brilliance. Everything just feels accelerated in this moment. And if the phial really is a counteraction or a counter spell to the ring, then the tension is just going to get a lot higher because Frodo is walking into the darkest place in the world with only half the protection that he really needs, which is scary. I don't exactly know what that means yet, but I can feel that the final chapters of this book are going to be the real test for Frodo and Sam, more than anything else that we've ever seen, and it just makes me really nervous. But one thing I do know for sure is that song is the real salvation of Middle-earth, but that is an essay for maybe next week. So if you made it this far in the essay, make sure you subscribe. You can like the video. You can become a member for some early access to videos and some members only streams and some other stuff that we do. You can also donate to a specific video if you really like that video. And remember, above all shadows rise the sun, and stars forever dwell. I will not say the day is done, nor bid the stars farewell. I'll see you in the next one.